This year marks the 10th anniversary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report and its 94 calls to action. The Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement and the stories of thousands of survivors culminated in concrete actions the TRC found would redress the lasting harms of the genocidal institutions and advance reconciliation. But how many of these 94 calls have been answered now, a decade later? Well, some might say not a lot, and even more calls have yet to be heard. Indigenous Watchdog is a nonprofit group dedicated to monitoring and reporting on how reconciliation is advancing in so-called Canada. In a 10-year progress report published earlier this month, they found 40% of the 94 calls are not being responded to. That means 22 calls to action are stalled and 16 have not even started, leaving 42 calls in progress with only 14 of the 94 calls completed since 2015. You might wonder who's responsible for the progress or lack thereof. Those accountable to answering certain calls include a mix of the federal, provincial, territorial, and Indigenous governments, religious organizations, and various other entities and associations. The calls to action, or CTAs, target 22 areas ranging from child welfare to health, language and culture, justice, and much more. Only 9 of these categories have at least one call completed, according to Indigenous Watchdog. Some CTAs of note are number 3, calling for the full implementation of Jordan's Principle, which has been recently stalled due to funding changes within the federal program. Also stalled is number 58, calling for the Pope to apologize to Catholic Church residential school survivors and family. It was only partially met in 2022 when Pope Francis apologized for the Church's role in Indian residential schools, which some say fell short. Former chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the late Murray Sinclair, said this in response. It is important to underscore that the Church was not just an agent of the state, nor simply a participant in government policy, but was a lead co-author of the darkest chapters in the history of this land. CTAs yet to see any movement include number 6, calling for the repeal of Section 43 of the Criminal Code. This call looks to end corporal punishment against children by parents and teachers. And CTA 55, calling on all levels of government to publish annual reports on progress towards reconciliation. Despite these areas that still need improvement, there are still calls answered and completed, such as CTA 49, calling for all religious denominations and faith groups to repudiate the doctrine of discovery, and CTA 41, calling on the federal government to appoint a public inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. It took 10 years for 14 calls to be answered following the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's release of their final report. If reconciliation efforts continue at this rate, the 94 calls to action won't fully be answered until 2082. Which begs the question, how many residential school survivors will see reconciliation in their lifetime? Sav Jones, APTN National News, Winnipeg.